got new intro music. Woo! Hey, you are looking live at What's the Golfcast. Prelude Success Sessions. Who knows? We got a special guest today. Woo! Oh, I can't do it. Look, I said for the show, I told the audience, I told them I got a new intro music. I would never listen to Rage Against the Machine, but musical entree of the remake of that song. Hey, happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to the end of March. We got a special guest today. And Mike D. Chris, you want to introduce yourself?
What's up, everybody? Man, so happy to be back with you, Jack. Man, I just love this time together. Looking forward to it.
Yes. Mike D.
Jack, the host. It's good to be here, man. We're excited.
Good to see you guys. Hey, we have been in a process of talking about success and achieving success, and we've been going through, hey, what are traits of success? And we've been through a series of words, if you follow the show, from persistence to courage, charisma, integrity, focus. And then honestly, today we really didn't have a word because if you missed it, there was some event that took place at the Oscars that we wanted to talk about, and maybe outside what you're hearing in the norm, some elements of that event that happened at the Oscars. And so then as we were speaking about it, this word redemption came up and tied to success. So today's word is going to be about redemption. And our staff came up with that as we were just talking about the contents of this Oscar show, which was amazing. And so that's what we wanted to deep dive in today, because I think most of the people that are on LinkedIn and certainly tuning into this, or if you're in podcasts, or whatever you're doing, or trying to get to the next level to achieve some success. And what we saw at the Oscars was so amazing outside the craziness factor, right? Everyone tuned in. In full disclosure, I was not watching, and I was scanning through Twitter, and they're like, was that real? Was that real? And I was like, what just happened, right? So I click it on, and obviously everyone's seen those moments since then. But were you guys watching the Oscars live? Was either one of you tuned into that event? It's lowest ratings ever? No.
Nope.
And we're not live either. So the three of us not live. The beauty of today's media-centric world, we get to see it. Oh my! Oh, and today
Our producer Lacey was live.
For Lacey is a Oscars movie buff, and so we're going to see how long if she can stay outside the show for the entire show. Well, there are odds on that. The staff is taking a poll, so we'll see. But so as we dive into what happened at the Oscars, the reason really it fits into kind of what we've done with the show is that event had so many small details in it, which were amazing. Obviously, the Oscars in that industry, the best of the best. Here's your award. You've achieved the highest level. Will Smith's about to achieve that. It's odds on he's going to win Best Actor. And even with that coming, kind of lost his self-control in the middle of the process, which is crazy. So what was your guys' first takeaway when you saw the clip of that incident?
Mike, what you got?
Well, it was really, well, the first thing was it real, right? Was that staged? Was that some way to spark things up? But then, as you think about it, there's so many, especially as a married person. I mean, I saw that through the eyes of a husband. I think something looks like it might be a little bit funny. I look over and I realize by my wife's reaction, it's not funny. And then I go into some kind of, and potentially I could have went into alpha mode. I went into beast mode. I could have went into fight or flight mode. But apparently it was flight from his seat to fight with Chris Rock. It was an easier fight. And so I'm not sure, I have no idea of all the background to it, but it was, it did not seem, it seemed inappropriate for the moment, regardless of the situation, that that in the Oscars over the past 5 years, everybody's been super excited that the host pushes the edge of the envelope, when we've seen hosts of the Oscars redefine the envelope. And so when you say, hey, no rules here, then all of a sudden you say there's rules here, it gets a little choppy and things go sideways.
Yeah, quite honestly, one of the reasons I wasn't even tuning in is, man, that kind of seems like they're constantly pushing a narrative that I might not necessarily agree with. And so when I saw this go down, my first question was, is this some part of a staging setup to like try and push some type of issue or narrative? And then after the fact, the details kind of start coming out. And I think there's still question as to whether or not that was even, staged. I mean, the fallout beyond that, if it was staged, that was a horrible PR move, because the fallout after the fact is just it's not working in Will Smith's favor at all. Maybe Chris Rock's, but when I saw that, I'm like, you know what? I go, we're just seeing real life play out here. Like this guy Will Smith at the top of his game, the top of the rung of the ladder of success, right? Like he's right there at the apex, and what happens? He loses it. Like any other person walking through life, this guy just loses it. He does it on TV in front of millions of people. But you know what? Those things don't surprise me, guys. I mean, why? Because Will Smith, despite his level of success, despite his notoriety, is a man broken in nature, dealing with challenges, the same thing that you're dealing with, that I'm dealing with, that everybody listening's dealing with. So really, it's not big of a surprise. The fact that he lost his cool, man, it happens to everybody. I'm wondering if it was staged still. Honestly, I'm not quite sure that's going to come out.
Yeah, they're all actors, right? So what's interesting? One of the most interesting part of the dynamic is that the feedback since you would think sometimes it would all fall on one side, but it is 50-50. That there's people. Sometimes the females are like, "Hey, I'm glad he defended his wife," and then some of the, "Hey, there's no place for violence." So it is interesting. It's not a one-sided event. People watch that, and sometimes it's opposite of how you think people would come down on it, right? Some people, my family was together the last couple of days, and there was an ongoing debate about, was it good or what is it bad? And just for the record, I would just say it's never appropriate to go on TV, strike somebody. Like, he could have done so many things. He could have walked on stage, grabbed the mic, said something about his wife. There's so many options, but for him to strike somebody, and then for me, and this is a small detail I haven't heard a lot of people talk about, to use the F word twice on live TV. He knows, as an actor, as famous actor, all inappropriate. And so it would just seem like for me personally, I'd love to see the Academy take away his award as something he would sit, because you see after the show, he seems to be out, like, enjoying, he's dancing around with his thing. But very, very interesting. I agree, Mike. When you said he was laughing, and there were some other issues, right? There were some other background things about having an open marriage and ... And it just seemed like that moment was all the pressures of his life just came out in like 30 seconds. But the nuance in that was, it's not like he ran on stage and struck somebody. He slowly walked, slapped him, and then turned his back and slowly walked back. That dynamic is very interesting, because I know when I lose my cool, it's all phonetic. It all comes apart really, really quickly, not slowly.
Well, Jack, we're talking about things that we saw that night in the replay. I should just in the replay. But in that, first thing I noticed really was Chris Rock. I thought, regardless of, I really don't know the whole dialogue or monologue, but I know that he got slapped on stage on live television, and his head went down, his head came back, and he stayed in his role.
And I have that too. Yeah, I wanted my.
He just handled himself. I mean, listen, that's his profession. I don't have to agree with what he's saying or not saying. In his profession, he stayed on point. And I would just say that we also learned that Denzel Washington saw it go down and said, "Hey, this is a teachable moment." Right? I'm on the outside of this. I don't need to be in the middle of this, but I see this as a teachable moment. I'm going to step in and try to raise the bar of this whole event.
Yeah, I think what Chris Rock did, that was one of my biggest notes. For me, there's a whole section about talking about his response, which was unbelievably composed. I even thought, as a guy, like, he stayed on his feet, came right back up, smiled, didn't strike back, held his composure, mixed in a semi lighthearted line, and then actually also delivered the award. That is unbelievable. I would just hope, I think all of us hope, if we were on the other side of that, would handle ourselves with such grace in a moment that's going to replayed millions, if not billions of times. And then, Chris, I know in your job, there's a lot of high stress moments like that. When you see him trained, you think that came natural? Like, what's your perspective when you see him be so composed in a very heated moment? I think most men are like, "Ooh, I'm going to punch you." Especially when he turns around, you're like, "Oh, I'm going to go get him."
Chris,
Yeah.
I wasn't on the show last time when you were on with us, when you're on with Jack. What
Yeah.
is it that you do?
Yeah, so I'm a Secret Service agent. I've been doing it for 23 years now, and Jack, great question. I mean, that also brings up to me like was this all part of the program? Because to see someone take it, see it coming, take a hit, and then react the way he did. I mean, not everybody has that composure built into them. In fact, I've seen some of the most well-trained individuals in the heat of the moment lose their composure. Yet this guy, Chris Rock, in front of TV, in front of just getting slapped in front of millions of people, comes back immediately, stays in role and plays his part there. So, who knows? I mean, that was commendable, obviously. But the fact that you brought up Mike Denzel Washington and taking advantage and trying to make that a teachable moment. I think we all, as we look at this on how this landed on the public stage, I think we all should. I think the smart way is to come at it as a teachable moment, right? Because it's never right, Jack. You hit it. It's never right to go and assault someone, right? Unless you're defending someone, you're protecting someone, like you're in that mode. To go and offensively assault someone, like on TV, I mean, it's never right. It's like never the right option there, right? So what? On the other side of this, what is the teachable moment that we, as men and women, as adults, looking at it from the backside, like, what are we going to get out of this? Because if it's just going to be a guy losing his cool, that happens every day. You can just pull up 1,000 different videos of a guy losing his cool. But Will Smith getting on stage at the peak of his success, right?
Yes.
A guy who was, by every metric, done everything that he could want to do in his career. He gets up there and loses it like that. Like, what is the teachable moment here? And I think it is important. I think Denzel Washington took advantage of that. He's kind of, I think, brought himself out as a mature individual. Like over the last decade, he's just come out consistently with a mature viewpoint on so many different things. And once again, he steps into the role during this, and I think it's great.
Yeah, I would. If we have the quote, I think from Denzel Washington, I'd love to bring it up. That right there. So if you're unaware, right after that happened, before Will Smith won his only Oscar, it seems like, I think that he's never won one before. At your highest moment, be careful. That's when the devil comes for you. And so for our audience, I would just say the three of us hosting the show are men of faith, and we saw that. That's where we really love to focus today. I don't want to get into, is Will Smith a good actor, and his future, and Chris Rock, and all the woke left side of Hollywood. God bless, some redemption there. Denzel being part of that. But that moment, that quote is so true. And that's where we get to the redemption topic with today's show, right? So when you hear that quote, Mike, what's the first thing that flew in your mind?
Well, man, actually, I was in a marriage conference with my wife, and the guy's name was Bob Barnes, and him and his wife were doing the marriage conference, and he said, "Your greatest strength." Then he prefaces and says, "Some of you think your marriage is your greatest strength." He goes, "I want you to consider it a double weakness." Why is it a double weakness? Because you take it for granted, so you don't hone it or sharpen it. And you also take it for granted, so you don't defend it. And so not only are you vulnerable, you're stagnant in what you identified. Most people are vulnerable and stagnant in their greatest strength. And so he's challenged us not to work on our weaknesses, but to double down on our strength, double down on our marriage. And he said, that's what we're doing here at the retreat. But that when you forget that humans are vulnerable. Humans are vulnerable, and things are going to go sideways. That is a fact of life, and it doesn't matter what stage you're in. I think Chris said that earlier. Like, these are common, right? These are common, and it's so funny that I was listening to a song today. The song was Bob Seger, "The Fire and the Fire Down Below" was the name of the song, and he talked about mayors, firemen, politicians in the song. And he says, we've all got one thing in common, which is the desires of the flesh, right? To do the things we know we shouldn't do. But we've got this thing, he talked about going in the darkness, hiding from the light. It was really interesting. It's a Bob Seger song. I knew every word, but I never heard it before. It's so funny that he was saying that, listen, we've got this one thing in common, but we have to learn, and that one thing can either master us or we can master it.
Yeah, What's interesting about the Denzel quote is we talked a lot about achieving success and that moment, how quickly it can all go away, right? So it'll be interesting to see what the consequences of this will be for all parties, right? All the parties involved. But it's like we focus so much, the world focused so much on achieving success, getting to the next level, getting your goals, and then once you do, what happens? And I just can't imagine what Will Smith, because if you follow him, he's doing motivational things, outreaching, trying to be a better person. Some of the movies he's done are very inspirational, right? So some of the stuff he's done is really amazing. Background, lighthearted, comedic guy, and then to watch this, it just all in like 48 hours or 72 hours to go from the highest highs to one of the most embarrassing moments to wanting to defend your wife and all the things that maybe are wrapped up in being a man and masculinity and honorable. So much tied into that. And I think very little gets talked about how to keep the success, how to maintain the success, and then when it starts to fall apart, right? So what do you guys feel? Do you any thoughts on what you've seen, how you've seen folks get to that level and then be able to hold on and keep it, keep it together, maintain it? Because as I said, my LinkedIn, it can be more painful. The analogy I use, you fly first class, right? And you're like, I don't want to go back to coach. You know what I mean? Now I've seen it. And then once you've had success, maybe to have some of it taken away or have the shine taken away. What do you guys see?
Yeah. In this particular example, guys, look, Will Smith and his wife, Jada, they opened up a massive vulnerability to both of their lives several years ago when they decided to make a mockery of their covenant vows and do what's called a quote unquote open marriage, which essentially is just adultery, right, on both sides. So they opened up a massive door for the enemy to come into their lives and begin to do really undermining work in both of them, right? And so, like, when I see Will Smith, when this is playing out to him, it's almost like you see the culmination of the enemy's work in his life, in that marriage specifically, right? The culmination of the frustration of what they've allowed to happen, right? Like one, they haven't been fighting for their marriage. So him getting up and fighting for her honor in this scenario, it's almost hypocritical to me. I'll be honest with you. Like, brother, if you want to fight, get to fighting for your marriage, get your wife out of another man's bed, get back to strengthening the things that God holds dearly, which is the vows and the covenant you made, and stop treating it like a contract, right? So it's almost like hypocrisy in my book. To me, that kind of was the boiling over of a lot of enemy work in their life that I saw happen there. So, if I were Denzel, if I had a position with Will Smith of confidence as a brother who cared for and he respected, I said, brother, you got to get to fighting for what's actually important. Like, this here is a show. This here is shallow. I want you to get deep work in your life. And that means getting back to strengthening those things which really are important, which had eternal consequence, which are your marriage vows.
Yeah, I think he's, it's interesting. So this incident happens. He goes on stage and it does his acceptance speech, because he does win the Oscar for Best Actor, right? And then he says a line that I also wrote down: love makes you do crazy things. And it's so interesting how it's been, as you mentioned, Chris, that their marriage, they put a lot of things out there, is off, I think, what most people would consider a good marriage. Oh, so there's the incident, right, when Denzel grabs him before he gets the Oscar, and he's crying on stage and says, love makes you do crazy things. But I would just say, I told a couple people I was trying to find an example, but like the one that sticks with me, this probably a little dates me. Whitney Houston grew up, in church singing, great image, da, da, da. And then she connects with Bobby Brown, who, just came from a different side of the streets, God bless, New Edition. And they got together, and you could just see if she was living I don't know, quality life, and maybe he wasn't, he definitely brought her down. She did not lift him up. And you saw the net result in her life. It's been somewhat tragic. And it just seems like the same thing in Will Smith's life with Jada. It's like if you go back, he was a rapper, lighthearted guy, da, da, da. And then he connected with Jada, and it's been choppy, as Chris mentioned. And it's love, or the desire for love, does make folks do crazy things. And I think that played out on screen, right? That's a crazy, if you said, hey, you're going to win the Oscar tonight, but right before that, you're going to walk on stage and slap somebody. It makes what Kanye did years ago with just running over to talk to Taylor Swift, say she shouldn't have won it, seem minor. Then you wonder what the consequences would be, right? The the outtake of that, a desire for love, true love. I think you could just see he was laughing, right? And then a minute later he was on stage, which is so odd. That desire. And Mike, I know you work with a lot of folks and their marriages, and when you see that, when you see maybe it's unequally yoked, what's the dynamic it creates?
Well, the first thing is that love is love, and there's many false definitions of it, right? To say, like, true love does not make you do crazy things like that. True love doesn't let you get in those crazy situations. True love goes back to what Chris was talking about. Like, true love doesn't look like this. True love isn't, this is tainted. This is cloudy. This is so, well, there's so many impurities in it. Like when Denzel says, hey, Will, be careful, the devil's knocking at your door. I'm sorry, but Will, you made a room for the devil in your house. I mean, like, he's not knocking at your door. He's in the master bedroom. And so when you say those things, like, listen, there's an old saying about cleaning house. There's some house cleaning needs to be done. You can't just like, and here's the funny thing is there's so many weird little things, but the little thing is a man walked up and struck another man that didn't do anything to him except talk to him. And that's wrong. And now it's not, but now 2 days later, it's not clearly wrong anymore, according to the world that's talking about this thing. Well, he was provoked. Well, listen, in Chris's world, you're not allowed to hit people. I mean, it's just like if somebody says something to you, you're not allowed to hit them. That's just it. It breaks down the little ways, and then it comes in the big ways, and we've got to be so careful. And so when I talk about the unequally yoked person, once you're married, well, now you've got to decide what your standard is based upon this marriage, because you're in danger, but you're married, right? So, again, this is work that ideally would have been done before the marriage. Now you're married. The divorce is never the recommendation. It's always, okay, now we've got to navigate this well together. And how are we going to raise the tide instead of sinking the ship? And so there's a lot of opportunities there. But first of all, you've got to realize, you've got to say that, hey, the ship is sinking. If you're not going to say the ship is sinking, we're just going to ride in we're going to redesign the ship. It's really hard to embrace anything in that, because you can't fix what you don't think is broken.
Right. Yeah. And I think just looking at the Will Smith example of someone who is successful by any metric as far as his career goes, it's kind of a mirage, isn't it? Because if the family, if the relationship with your marriage is unstable, if what I'm saying, the wheel doesn't turn well if the axle is not properly greased, right? And that's kind of what you see. Like no matter kind of how high you've flown in your career with success, you're never going to experience the fulfillment that comes with that if the foundation is cracked, right? Like it's always going to be kind of a mirage. There's always going to be some instability there. And I think we kind of see that. This is a good example, but we can see it really all over the place with people who have reached great heights professionally, but who haven't established that healthy, strong, deep-rooted foundation in their life. Like that success is always kind of a mirage. Like they're always unstable. They're always looking for the next thing because nothing brings them contentment. Because why? They don't have a foundation they're standing on. It's always unsteady.
I think one of the things I think each of you guys hit on is it's not love. You know what I mean? Like that thing he said, he's like, man, love makes you, that's not love. Like that's insecurity. That's a desire for love. That's unsettledness. I mean, right. Love would be the opposite. If you had true, deep love, you'd look over, your wife maybe be no good. You'd have the confidence and security in each other. And that would be handled in such a different way. But we are so off course. Our society has this kind of flipped version of what's good and not good. It's now like, yeah, he went, defended his woman. It's like, no, like literally if they had a rock solid, foundationally strong, true love, they probably would have exchanged looks. There'd have been some stuff. And then he would have backstage offline. But you could tell the insecurity in that moment caused the violence, caused the screaming after the violence. It's like, oh, that's everything real love's not. But you know what I would just say? That's what a lot of people think love is. Yeah. And that's why we have a lot of, we all know the stats. of issues with marriage, because people do feel like, if you really love me, you do this. If this happened, you would do this. And it's so odd, because real love is the opposite, right? Where you can just look at your spouse and be like, hey, we're good. You don't need to make a fool of yourself. In fact, tonight's your night. I'm going to let this wash over me, and I'm still going to make sure the night's about you and the biggest moment of your career, not, hey, can you intervene and make this probably a more memorable event, actually. Crazy. But I would just say, again, I think both of you said that's really not love, right? That's a struggle.
Yeah. We got to see the struggle play out. Yeah. And it's when that happens, it's never pretty, right? Like it's never pretty. Like the brokenness starts to bubble to the top, and that's what happens. That's one of the examples, man. It's a shame.
I think there's a big opportunity too. So as we talk about redemption and what's that mean in success, a lot of people, especially in the social media world today, we see all the good things, right? Oh, people on social media, here's my best moment, my best picture, the best days of my life. And when it's going to crap, look, we all know our friends go silent. Oh, I haven't heard from Bob or Mary in 3 months, right? Because people don't want to put out the things they're struggling with a lot of the time. And so what will be interesting in this process to see how much the people involved share and how much they move. And we saw Denzel Washington step in, and try to provide some guidance and some, food for thought, a deep point. Hey, in the moment, the devil's coming after you, right? And you can walk out now. They said, that's the moment. I think they were saying he was crying. He might want to leave. And Denzel, Denzel said the devil's coming to get you. And I would just, a little quick sidebar, for those of you not of faith, we're like, why are they talking about the devil? Well, listen, the Bible's really clear that the devil comes to destroy. And so that's a real thing. Whatever image or thing you want to put in your head about that, Hollywood again kind of creates the devil. Probably that's not how it really is, but coming, right? The enemy does not want to see you succeed, whether you think that's the devil, the person you dislike, or sometimes a friend near you think's a friend that's really not rooting for you, right? It's a lot of stuff encapsulated there. So it'll be interesting to see how the players handle this kind of redemption, get back process, right? And so have you guys seen those moments or have some examples of or thoughts or situations you've seen turn around and kind of provide a better, sometimes we have to learn the hard way, right? We're human beings. We're not great at necessarily taking advice. Sometimes we have to touch the stove before we really hear or are willing to learn, right? We don't want to learn the easy way.
It's interesting when you think about being a little kid. The little kids define everything so wonderfully pure. Like they go, "Hey, mommy, how many parents do you have? 2, right? Does mommy have a boyfriend? No. Does daddy have a girlfriend? No, right? It's just so basic in how little kids understands things, and as we get older, somehow we call it adult language, right? We watch television. Go, this show may have adult language. It's because the language is going to be incredibly immature, right? We say that, oh, there might be some things in this that are adult scenes that we should. Why do we call it that? That's probably going to be immature, and so it's so hard to keep following this dialogue of there's a new way to define things when the old way has been so established and so true in what's right and wrong. And as we try to redefine that, we see evidence after evidence of it gets choppy. And the other thing I think is so important that we learn in this is that when one part of your life is stellar, top of the world, best in class, if the rest of your life is not in shape, it doesn't matter. It's going to fall apart, and the brokenness will reveal itself. And so that's why I think one of the things we talk about in Prelude to Success, Jack and Chris, is that you've got to be paying attention to every aspect of your life, and you can't neglect one for the benefit of the other. You have to be building up constantly on all sides.
Yeah, Mike, very good points, man. I think as we're looking at this scenario play out in Hollywood, it's kind of interesting that Hollywood, the kind of the land of imagination, right? Like real life has definitions and Hollywood has definitions. And, the real life definition of being in a relationship, being in a marriage, being a good husband, it's not the Hollywood version. The real life definition, if anybody knew the actual job description, right, of good husband, good father, Christian man of God, they wouldn't want the job, because the real definition is I wring myself out daily for those under my care. I go to bed tired every day, letting myself overflow into the lives of other people, working my tail off to ensure that I lift others up despite my own needs. Like that's the real job description of a husband and father, not the Hollywood version of everything. Everything kind of goes back and forth. I get what I want, you get what I want. It's a real contract where you serve my needs, I serve yours, and everybody's happy. No, the real life definition is I see you at your worst and I'm going nowhere. I see you at your worst and I'm going to fight for you, no matter what this costs me, no matter what this looks like to me, no matter how much time and energy I have to expend. This is important. I'm going nowhere, right? So they're not only dealing with a broken marriage, but they're in Hollywood where everything seems to really just have a fakeness about it. Look, I'm not trying to do a drive-by shaming on all the Hollywood people, but here's the deal. It really kind of seems to be a fantasy world where relationships last 3 and 4 weeks, and they're trading people back and forth amongst each other in that environment, and it's just unhealthy in general. But when you see the real definition of what this looks like, that men and women fight for what is important, and they wring themselves out daily for it, it's a different definition. And I think we really need to, instead of pointing to their version, we need to point to the real version and inspire men and women to lead those types of lives instead of lifting up and pointing to that type of life as something we need to be chasing after.
Yeah, and I would say, that really applies to all relationships. I mean, if you think about your best friends, ideally you want that in your partner in life, right? They've been there through the worst times, right? Your best friend, and it's like, what is that? The toughest moments really, they don't make your character, they reveal your character. And when you're going through this stuff, typically when we're in our 20s or 30s, we had some moments, maybe our teens, and some people that stayed around through that, and those become your best friends, right? You go through the fire with people. That's how you develop friendships. It's the posse's easy. You have a big group when things are good, like when you're paying the tab or you're going places or things are good. That's easy. Those aren't real friends. And when it hits the fan, hey, who's around to go through that with you? Those are the people that are your real friends. And it takes the fire, it takes the problem to actually sift through who's really there for you and who's there for themselves, right? And that's a big part of marriage, and it's a big part of life. And we see that play out sometimes, not like the publicly the other day, but you see it on your friends and they're not friends anymore. You see it on social media when people are arguing. You're like, ooh, this is really going south. But the ability to work through an issue is amazing.
I work with a lot of quote unquote tough guys, and I've had plenty of opportunities over the years to really mentor and speak into their lives just because of my seniority. And I can't tell you how many times I've told some tough guys, like, hey, look, it's anything but tough in the Lord's eyes. The fact that you're constantly getting toppled by your passions and your lust, like when they have control over you, you're anything but tough. You got to be a fighter. Like you got to decide what is right. Where am I standing? Where am I rooted? And you got to fight for that, because if you're constantly getting toppled by your passions, your desires, your most base needs, then brother, you are anything but tough in this world. You got to be a fighter. And what we're not seeing is enough fighters out there fighting for what is right. And we're not seeing that. And we see the ripple effects of that throughout our country, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And that's where you get toppled. I love that word you use, toppled. It topples you. You are not a tough guy. You are toppled. And none of us sign up to be toppled by anything. We want to be on top. So, and as we're aspiring for success and hopefully guiding a lot of other people towards success, that the goal that we're shooting for is, you need to define it, you need to defend it, but then you also have to make sure that the people around you want to go aspire to that new goal. Because one of the things I taught my kids when they were really, really young is that I didn't know how to say it to the kids. Like my dad said it one way, and it's not politically correct, so I just can't say that to my kids. And so I had to come up with a new way. And I said, Denkers are leaders. Kids, Denkers are leaders. And so if Denkers are leaders, you're going to go raise people up, but if they don't want to come up, you need to walk away and pray for them. If they don't want to come up, you can't help them up if they don't want to come up. And so if you find yourself down and you want to redefine what good is, stay there and keep redefining your own reality and doing your best with it. But if you want to really be successful in life and have a well-rounded, good life, you got to realize, you don't figure out what good is. You realize what good is. Good is good. You discover it. You don't make it. You discover good, and then you go towards good, and you make sure the people around you want to go with you towards that good. And that's how you get the posse Jack talked about. You get the posse that's going to take you to success instead of taking you down.
Right. Right. I
Yeah.
mean, we're sorry, Jack. I'll just let me finish up with this. Like, we're in a world that's constantly trying to convince us that we are defined by our desires, which is crazy because you have to change that in 5 months anyway. Right. But are we not? We're in a world that says, look, who you are your desires, and how unhealthy and toxic is that? Because the moment anybody comes in and says, I don't agree with that, then they feel like they're being attacked at the level of what? Their personhood. That's why we've created a world or a nation right now where everybody's enraged, everybody's ready to jump off the deep end, everybody's ready to attack back. Because if you're defining yourself by your desire, right, then if I disagree with you, then you're attacking me. Yeah, you're oppressing me. You're attacking me at a level that I have no choice but to attack you back. And man, that is unhealthy. There's no more kind of established foundational right and wrong. It's you do you, whatever that looks like. And even if it changes 3 months from now, you define yourself that way. And that is just an unhealthy path that we have entered upon, brothers.
Yeah, I think people attach their set of labels, right? So today it seems like people put labels on themselves, whatever they are, 3, 5, 7, 10 things. You know, I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, I'm that. And if you disagree or nudge them a little, it gets very shaky really quick. It's like, it's okay. It's okay. You're a Democrat or Republican. That doesn't define you forever. You're, this, you're that. It's okay. You're a student. It's okay. So we can agree to disagree. Doesn't mean we have to hate each other. One thing I just wanted to comment one last time on, getting back to the redemption piece, is that it's okay. This may not be politically correct, but what happened the other night is okay if over the coming weeks, days, this redemption piece shows up, because it happens to all of us. The only difference is this thing happened live on TV, is videotaped now. Millions of people are going to watch it forever. But for all of us, if we took our worst moments, or maybe second or third worst moments, right, recorded it and shot it out to the world, it wouldn't be pretty either, right? The reality is no judgment, right? We have to find a way to help people and not be so judgmental, because it's that thing when you point at somebody, 3 are pointing back at you. We've all been there. If we're super honest, we've all had moments you're like, oh, I was in, our producer would say, I was in Home Depot, lost my cool one time, the kids were young. I was unhinged about this guy making keys for us. I'm like, whoo, my kids are here, my family's here, right? And so if you take those moments that they're videotaped and you put them on the internet, it's bad. And so this show or the topic or the conversation, I don't want folks to misread. It's like, hey, it's not pretty, but it's part of the process. That's how we get there. And Will Smith, Jada, Chris Rock, all the folks involved, the Oscar people, there's so many good things that could come out of it if folks are willing to be vulnerable, acknowledge a mistake was made or it wasn't handled great, or hey, here's what we're doing to make it better. That part of redemption is so important, because the ability to just say, I'm sorry, earnestly, and then take a moment and make it teachable for a while could be amazing. This could be one of those things where Will Smith and Chris Rock and Jay, they talk about it for a while, and it changes how people feel. Because what's interesting, just like some of the stuff going on in Ukraine, people that were kind of set on different sides of the aisle have to look at it differently. They're like, oh, I thought you were, I thought that's what you stood for. Now they're kind of got to go back and forth and be like, oh, I'm not sure. And that opens the door for better communication, right? It's like, oh, you got to rethink what you were saying. I'll give you one analogy. I'll turn to you guys. Like, I would just personalize it. If you think about you're against some issue, right? Think about you're against some issue. And if one of your kids turns up in that issue, your entire perspective about it would change based upon your love of your child. And so that's what it's like. It's like it forces people to think about it differently and use it to help educate, learn, and grow, right?
Judgment gets us in trouble. We're not supposed to be judges. We're supposed to be rescuing folks. We're supposed to be helping folks. We're supposed to be helping folks grow. Yeah. And so I just think that if you're on the road to success, your road has to have guardrails. You get to design the guardrails. You get to build the guardrails. But they don't do any good on your road to success if you climb over the guardrails. You have to stay between the guardrails. And it's before you show up on the stage and your wife is insulted at the Oscars that you build those guardrails. You build them in the quiet, calm times, and you build them before you're successful. because all that money is a multiplier. So if you've got a good life that runs well between the guardrails, money is going to multiply that good life. But if you have a life that has no guardrails and you keep finding yourself on the, only the cliffs just get higher and the valleys get deeper and you have faster cars to drive off of them.
Yeah.
And so you really have to, if I could inspire you to stop right now, and if you don't have guardrails in your life, to figure out your 3 greatest weaknesses that you know about and start defining guardrails that make them harder to get into your life and put those guardrails up and then practice living between them. We've had a good show.
Yeah, Mike, such good points, man. I would tell, and I have told some men over the course of the last several years that you got to take inventory of your life. Like, are there things where when that thing calls, you got to pick up, like you got no choice? Is it women? Is it money? Is it alcohol? Is it substances? Whatever it is, like whatever the break in the guardrail is, right? If there's something that every time it rings, you got to pick up, you need to identify that. And then you need to take that somewhere. Like we're talking about redemption, and brothers, I can only come to it from my perspective, which if you're going to have redemption, you have to have a redeemer, right? Like you have to have an established and objective right and wrong, right, to compare that to. And when you do that, it's amazing how the light begins to shine in the dark places in your life and begin to see things you never saw before. But as long as we're allowing the world to say that whatever's right is what I say is right, whatever's wrong it doesn't matter, right? We never shine the light on anything. And those things continue to have inroads into our life and create toxicity that we have to deal with on an ongoing and enduring basis. And so you're right. Create the guardrails. Identify what are those things which every time it rings, you got to answer. And I don't care what it is. You got to identify that and start to hand that over to the person that's going to redeem it for you.
I love the guardrails analogy. There's so many good parts of it. It's like, hey, we don't all have to agree. The comment to everybody that's watching this: put up your guardrails, right? Like maybe Chris is more narrow, maybe Mike's is more wider, maybe mine are wider, whatever they are. But having those so that first step is you're not uncomfortable with your decisions, right? Because I'm sure if Will Smith had to do it over, he'd do it different, right? So like having I love the guardrails. That's a great like everyone's set that up so they have it. But then I love Mike. You mix them. The higher you go in success, the cliffs get deeper, right? If you go off the edge and you're at ground level and it's just a curb, you bust a tire. Who cares, right? You go over the edge and you're halfway up, you may get seriously injured. You go over the edge and you're way up, you probably die, right? So that analogy is so amazing. And what's the I think there's
Andy Stanley, best question ever.
Question, right? And so to Chris is like, hey, where are your guardrails? What's the question, Mike?
So the question is, based upon where you've been and based upon who you are and based upon where you want to go, what's the right thing to do?
Yeah. Can you repeat that? Let's do that again.
Based upon where you've been, based upon who you are, and based upon where you want to go, what's the right thing to do?
Yeah, it's so good. And it's different for everybody. Listen, we as human beings can be a little hard-headed, right? And sometimes we don't want to take guidance, especially if it's against what we're doing today. Or someone be like, hey, what you're doing is not great. We're like, oh, we don't necessarily hear that well. It's like an analogy in organizations when they do the HR review every year, like no one likes that. They're like, hey, we're going to do the HR review. We're going to tell you all the things you're doing great. But hey, the second half of the meeting is about all the things you're doing wrong. No one loves that. Like we want them to love it, but no, we're not wired to go, tell me all the things I stink at, right? No, we're just not wired to hear that very well. And I think the same in our personal lives, probably more so. Hey, here's a foundational, moral, ethical, success, foundational principle, as Chris mentioned, to help you live a better life. And so being able to speak those, talk about those, even in this show today, like talk about some concepts of homosexuality or marriage or religion or faith, they can be really alienating topics. And I just want to repeat, we share those and touch on those out of love to help folks get to the next level and have success and keep your success. Because that quote, again, if we could put the quote back up from Denzel, is amazing, right? At your highest moment, be careful, because that's when the devil comes for you. It's so true. You might get over for some period of time, but eventually, I would just say this, maybe more hip, more youthful. Listen, the game's been around forever, right? You can think you're going to beat the game, but you're not. The game's been around forever. You can play the game, but the game will get you. No one's gotten through the game. We think that's the devil's little lie. I'm better than the game. You're like, nope. Game's been around forever since the dawn of man, and you are not going to beat the game. So love the guardrails and that's great. Gents, any last thing? Chris, any last things you want to add?
Sure. Yeah. So look, we're in a battle, right? You can see it play out on TV. You can see it play out in everyday real life. The way we walk through this life with victory is deep work on your own life. In community, you got to have men and women in your life who you trust, you can bounce things off of, who can lock shields with you, right, in this battle over time. So deep work in community over time. You do those three things. You have those three things in your life. You're going to find yourself having more victories than defeats.
Amen. Amen. Michael?
I'll take what Chris said. Lock shields. Lock shields.
Lock shields. I love the guardrails. That's awesome. Gents, thanks for your time today. Really appreciate it. Such an interesting dynamic. It would be so interesting to watch how this plays out. Again, this could disintegrate and be horrible for a while, but hopefully, again, all the players involved use it as just a way to teach, a super teachable public moment could grow great fruit because it's going to be talked about for many years. Kanye going on stage was many years ago and still talked about. This will be talked about for a long, long, long time. And so hopefully it will have some positive outtakes, especially for the younger folks that maybe see it superficially. So good. Appreciate so much. I missed earlier, by the way, show sponsored by iHelp. We will do a double sponsor take next week, but a show sponsored by iHelp. If you're unfamiliar with iHelp, go get your iHelp account, $5 a month. All the ways you connect with people online. Amazing, amazing service. Can't encourage you enough to go use and get yourself set up with your iHelp handle. It will be the Twitter of communications in the future. So appreciate you so much. Enjoy the end of March. We are going into April. It'll be springtime and so hopefully a little warmer here up in the Maryland area. All right. God bless. Stay safe. See you soon. Whoa! Woo!